idea for the show.
I still don't know what the idea is.
It's about nothing.
Right.
Everybody's doing something. We'll do nothing.
They say, what's your show about? I say nothing.
There you go.
I think you may have something here.
Cross Coast Bias presents the League About Nothing podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the League About Nothing podcast. And boy, do we have a doozy today. Week 14 recap, injuries galore, a veritable trade bonanza, playoff preview. So without further ado, let's jump right in, start with the injuries. Starting off at the quarterback position, Raiders quarterback Aiden O'Connell got put in an air cast, carted off the field. Initial reports were that he suffered a season-ending injury, but a couple days into the week now, the injury reports are looking much rosier, and he is apparently attempting to play this week. Although head coach Antonio Pierce has already named Desmond Ridder the starter this week, we have seen Aiden O'Connell attempting to practice, and according to him, he wants to suit up this week. So, not sure what happened between that play on Sunday and today, but stay tuned, folks, because we're not sure who's going to start this week for the Raiders. And we may not know until Monday night when they play. Sticking with the quarterbacks, Saints quarterback Derek Carr picked up a left wrist fracture, left non-throwing hand for Derek Carr, and also put himself in the concussion protocol with what can only be described as an ill-advised dive into his own teammate, trying to pick up some yardage on a scramble late in this game. They have not ruled him out for this week, although he is progressing through the concussion protocol. Right now we see Jake Haener and failed early season fill-in starter Spencer Rattler splitting the first team reps. Jake Haener came into this game after Carr left because he's been the number 2 quarterback active on game days since Carr has come back. Not really sure what direction the Saints are going to go. They have not ruled out Derek Carr for this week. They have not put him on IR, even though it looked like a significant injury and looked like he may be out for the rest of the season here with only a few weeks left. But as of this recording, there is no word on who the starting quarterback will be this week. Moving to the running backs, Bucky Irving unfortunately suffered a back injury. He was already struggling through a hip injury that he had suffered week 13. He looked pretty good early in the game before his back tightened up. As of recording, he has not yet practiced this week and is starting to trend towards being doubtful for the first round of the playoffs. So right now we're just in a wait-and-see mode with Bucky Irving. It's possible that he could suit up this week even without practicing. 49ers running back Isaac Orendo, the now starter with Christian McCaffrey and Jordan Mason headed to IR. But unfortunately, he suffered a foot sprain in this game after getting off to a pretty hot start. He missed the first couple of days of practice, but he was able to get in a limited session on Wednesday. So his status is still up in the air for Thursday night. Unfortunately, 49ers running backs appear to be going the way of spinal tap drummers this year. So we'll see if he's able to suit up for this Thursday night game. If not, we'll probably get a heavy dose of Patrick Taylor. More on him in the trade section. And it's possible that we see recently acquired Israel Abanikanda active for the first time as some running back depth. And that brings us to our most unfortunate injury of the week. Carolina Panthers running back Jonathan Brooks tore his ACL again, the same ACL that he tore last year when he was playing for the University of Texas. He went down with a non-contact injury again. And now this is really troubling because this is the second ACL tear in essentially a calendar year. I don't even know if he was a full calendar year from when he had the ACL surgery in December of last year. Now we're looking at maybe another lost season next year based on the timing of this injury. And you have to start worrying about, long-term effects of tearing your ACL this close together and the same ACL this close together. for a guy who really hasn't been able to get his career started yet. I mean, we barely saw him on the field. They really slow played his injury as much as they could, and apparently did not help. Unfortunate for him, but it's looking like that Chuba Hubbard contract extension was more important than we all thought a few weeks ago. For the wide receivers, the only impactful one, Demarcus Robinson, suffered a AC joint sprain, which we've seen guys like CeeDee Lamb be able to play through it, and we've seen guys like Jordan Mason not be able to play through it. So it's a potential that this is just a pain tolerance thing for Robinson, and he is able to play. But again, he hasn't practiced at all, and they do play on Thursday, so we'll know sooner rather than later. For the tight ends, a couple of big ones here. Will Dissly injured his shoulder, left the game after the final play of the first half last week, and looks like he's going to miss multiple weeks with IR, a potential for him. He's unfortunately been extremely injury prone over his career. He's been effective when healthy, and for most of this season, he was the Chargers' number 2 option in the passing game. But it looks like the shoulder injury is going to knock him out for at least the rest of the regular season. And then, unfortunately for me specifically, David Njoku picked up a hamstring injury, hasn't been able to practice all week, and is trending towards missing this week. That will be a crushing blow for my playoff chances, as the Browns don't really have a clear replacement. Looks like we may see kind of a committee approach with Jordan Akins and Blake Whiteheart. And now on to the fun stuff. We've been complaining for weeks that the trade market has been stagnant, strangled. It's been difficult to get pieces moved here, with a lot of teams either not having a reason to sell or not having assets to sell. So now that the regular season has concluded and we know which 6 teams are locked into the playoffs, although 5 of them were already locked in before this week, there were 3 of us fighting for that last spot. But with that out of the way, we finally saw the dam break with a huge flurry of moves in the last couple of days. And the move that really kicked everything off was a trade between Mel Crisp and JMC. Mel Crisp acquired Miami Dolphins tight end Jonnu Smith, Chicago Bears wide receiver DJ Moore, and Philadelphia Eagles tight end Gravy Calcaterra. And JMC acquired Big Biscuit's 2025 first-round pick, Mel's 2026 second-round pick, and Judd's 2025 third-round pick. And this is kind of the trade that we've been waiting for. You know, it's a tale as old as time. The non-competing team trades away productive assets to a competing team for future draft capital. I think the trade was pretty much spot on as far as market value for these guys. The first, second, and third for DJ Moore, Jonnu Smith, and Gravy. What it does for JMC is it allows him to lock in those guys' market value in the form of draft picks, guys that he doesn't have to worry about coach changes, personnel changes, injuries, anything like that. He's got the value locked in now in the form of draft picks, which, as we know, are more liquid and more stable in price. At this point in the year, they're only going to go up in value over the offseason, and hopefully he'll be able to get a return for those picks for more than what he's given up here in player value-wise. And for Mel, 3 key pieces to help him try to catch the juggernaut that is Big Biscuit's roster. He picks up DJ Moore, who's been playing like a low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2 for the season, and has really come on strong since the firing of offensive coordinator Shane Waldron. And he also picks up Jonnu Smith, who is currently tight end 4 on the year and having a career season as the essentially Dolphins' number 2 receiver. The Dolphins have moved into a quick-hitting, yak-heavy offense where Tua is just trying to get the ball out of his hands as quickly as possible. And guys like Devon Achane and Jonnu Smith have really flourished, getting a lot of targets underneath and having the ability to pick up yards with their legs after the catch. Jonnu Smith really kind of flourished in this role, having a career year. And again, the tight end 4 on the season, he's obviously been very impactful for fantasy, especially in a format like this. And then Gravy Calcaterra, who will be filling in for Dallas Goedert for probably the rest of the regular season. We talked about Goddard in last week's injury report, but he's still likely to miss a few more weeks. The next trade was also with JMC, but this one involved me and apparently caused a lot of consternation in the league and the league chat and my DMs. The trade was Bryce Oliver, Tennessee Titans rookie wide receiver, for Jeremy McNichols, who is now filling in as the Washington handcuff with Eckler on IR. Seems like a lot of people didn't know who Bryce Oliver was and thought that maybe he was not worth the league-winning upside that Jeremy McNichols brings as the platoon mate for Brian Robinson. To me, it seemed like a pretty simple trade. Jeremy McNichols has temporary value right now, not really a long-term asset. Not sure he'll even bring any value at all in the short term, but I can take all the running back depth I can get right now as I somehow managed to sneak into the playoffs with no running backs. And for JMZ, he acquires a guy on a team that he follows more closely than the rest of us, but Oliver's kind of worked his way up the rotation since he flashed in the preseason as an undrafted rookie free agent. He's kind of slowly earned his way into that wide receiver 4 role, and a team like the Titans could go into valuation mode down the stretch, shut down old vets that aren't really in their plans, like Tyler Boyd. So there's a potential he could get a little bit more run here later in the season. But either way, there's a good chance that Bryce Oliver has more value than Jeremy McNichols going forward in the offseason, at least from a long-term perspective. The next trade was between myself and my absent co-host here, where Jarsal acquired a 25 fifth-round pick belonging to Georgia Mike, and I acquired 49ers 8th-string running back Patrick Taylor. Again, the 49ers running backs have been dropping like Spinal Tap drummers, and it seems like Patrick Taylor might be the next man up on Thursday. We'll find out if Guerendo can play or not. If Guerendo does not play, then Patrick Taylor has a lead back role for this week, then worth it for me because I need all the running backs I can get. And that will be a recurring theme here as we go through the trades. And for the price of a 2025 fifth-round pick, it was worth a gamble. For Jarsal's team, you know, he'll take the draft pick. It was unlikely that Taylor was ever going to have value outside of this. It's unlikely that Taylor would even be on this roster, on the 49ers roster, without all of the injuries. So he's happy to cash in and get whatever he can get. All right, the next trade, also involving my team, also involving running backs, was a trade with Criddle, where Criddle picked up a pair of third-round picks, one belonging to my team, one belonging to Big Biscuits, along with Philadelphia backups Will Shipley and Tanner McKee. And I acquired Kendrick Bourne, wide receiver from the Patriots, Nick Chubb, running back from the Browns, and Tyler Algier, running back from the Falcons. So again, the thought here was to pick up as much running back depth as possible. Nick Chubb is the starting running back for the Cleveland Browns. He's still working his way back from a major injury last year. He hasn't really looked like the Nick Chubb of old. He's been playing about 30 to 40% of the snaps for the Browns. And when they need a passing down back, they bring in Jerome Ford. Considering how much they've been passing in recent weeks, he's not getting a ton of work, but you know, I'll take whatever carries I can get. And that's a similar story to Tyler Algier. Although he's the backup for the Falcons, he gets about the same amount of touches per week as Nick Chubb has been getting right now as the Falcons try to play hide the quarterback and run as much as possible to keep Kirk Cousins from having to throw. That seems to be the current philosophy for the Falcons. And for Criddle, he gets to lock in some value, cash out on an old running back and a vet and a backup running back. hopefully he can use those third round picks and kind of reset the position. It looks like it's going to be a pretty deep running back class this year. So it's very possible he ends up with another couple of guys who have similar roles as rookies next year. The next trade was one that probably shocked the league. This trade was also involving Criddle, but this time JMC, where JMC acquired Christian McCaffrey and Criddle acquired Curtis Samuel and a 2026 second-round pick belonging to JMC. So now this one's a tough one because the value on CMC has swung so wildly over the course of this season and specifically the last couple of weeks. I mean, this guy has been a league winner when healthy, but obviously this year he was not healthy. I mean, you've seen in the past he's had a checkered injury history, and this year in particular was very frustrating. CMC basically day to day, week to week for almost the entire season, and then he finally did come back and did not look like himself. And then when he finally did start to look like himself, he immediately got hurt again and will be out the rest of the regular season at least. So for Criddle, he just wanted off this ride, I'm sure. Lock in some value, some return in the form of a 2026 second before potentially the floor drops out completely. And for JMC, if Christian McCaffrey can stay healthy in the offseason, come back and be productive next year, obviously he'll multiply this return by a lot, whether through trade or just the actual production he'll get on his team. And at the price of a future second round pick, it was a worthwhile gamble. And that brings us to our final trade of the week, or at least the final trade that made it into this recording, because the moves have been coming fast and furious all week, and we may not have seen the last one. This trade involves Criddle again. It also involves my team, and it also involves Big Biscuits. We had a 3-team trade. So let's break this down. Big Biscuits acquired Nick Chubb and Deebo Samuel, and he gave up Alan Lazard, Mike Boone, and Brian Robinson. Criddle acquired Alan Lazard and a 2026 third-round pick from my team, and he gave up Deebo Samuel. And I acquired Mike Boone and Brian Robinson and gave up Nick Chubb and the 2026 third-round pick. So for Criddle, this is probably similar to his thoughts on Christian McCaffrey. He just wanted to get out of a player who's been underperforming and injury prone. Deebo Samuel's really struggled this year, whether it's because of the other players missing around him or just an accumulation of injuries that he suffered in his career. He's certainly not the same explosive player that he has been in years past. So in his mind, he's probably trying to cash out and get something before the floor drops out completely. And for Big Biscuit's team, he's acquiring Deebo and Chubb, the two of them hoping that, they can bounce back and regain at least some of their former glory. He's got the depth and talent on this roster that if they don't bounce back, it doesn't hurt him much. But if they do, these are potential every week lineup staples that he's getting at a very discounted price. And for me, I'm acquiring more running backs. Again, this is what I need to do in order to have any chance of being competitive this week. And Brian Robinson has a much better schedule and has been far more effective than Nick Chubb this year. So it was worth it to give up Chubb and a pick to try to upgrade there for my running back 2 spot. And that's pretty much it. So a lot of trades this week, and not all of them involving me, unfortunately. We don't have anything really to cover in the waivers section. Not anybody worth talking about. I think the highest bid was on Ezekiel Elliott, so that tells you all you need to know about waivers. So let's go ahead and recap the final week of the regular season, week 14 matchups. I'm not sure what the median score was because it doesn't display on desktop, but I'm going to tell you that half the teams went over it and half the teams went under it. And the team that was the highest over it was our commissioner, Mel Crisp. He beat Georgia Mike this week 285.4 to 218.76. With one of the highest scores that we've seen this year, Mel moves to 22-6 and locks up the second bye week. And Georgia Mike, unfortunately, falls to 15 and 13. He did manage to break the median, but did not get the head-to-head win. So it left him in 7th place and the first team out of the playoffs, unfortunately. So looking at Mel's team this week, he just had an absurd week, led by 2 players breaking 50 points, with Josh Allen again doing something that no one's ever done before, following up a week when he had done something that no one else has ever done before by running, throwing, and catching a touchdown in the same game. This week he threw for 3 touchdowns and also ran for 3 touchdowns to score 55.63 points, the 6th highest individual player score in the history of our league. He is now the only quarterback in the top 10 of highest scores on the week. And finishing just short of Josh Allen was Jamar Chase with 52.35, narrowly missing out on cracking the top 10 single game scores himself. Jamar Chase went 14 for 177 and 2 touchdowns. And just an absurd score for this week. 2 players over 50 points. That's got to be a record that I am not willing to look up. So we're just going to go ahead and say this is the first time that this has ever happened. Unfortunately for Georgia Mike, he was on the other side of this matchup. He did get nearly 40 points from Zach Charbonnet. We had more 35-plus point scores in this week than I think we've had in most of the rest of the season combined. There's a lot of big scores this week, a lot of spike weeks on the last week of the regular season. Unfortunately, it just wasn't enough. He had a handful of good scores here, but, got him over the median, got him into the top couple of scores in the week. It just wasn't in the same stratosphere as Mel this week. The next high score of the week belongs to Flea. She managed to beat Big, 246.93 to 216.96, bringing her record to 21-7 and dropping Big to a final record of 25-3. So Big finishes with the number 1 seed, with the best record, most points scored. But unfortunately, Flea's been his bugaboo this year. She's the only team that's actually beaten him head-to-head, and now she's done it twice in one season. We'll see if third time's the charm if they match up in the playoffs. But she'll be the number 3 seed with the double win on this week. And she was led by a career game from Sam Darnold, 350 yards and 5 touchdowns. Along with the reemergence of Tyreek Hill, he went 10 for 115 and a touchdown to score 34.1 points. A lot of 30-plus point scores this week. Unfortunately, none on Big's side. He did get over the median because his team is just so deep. Everyone on his team scores 20 points pretty much every position every week. But no real spike weeks for him this week. Kind of kept his score a little bit more subdued than we're used to seeing, and allowed Flea to cash in with the victory. The next highest score in the week belonged to yours truly with a 244.56. I defeated Benign Rug, who scored 153.69. So the win and the win against the median brought my final regular season record to 17-11. Good enough to secure the 6th and final playoff spot. And unfortunately, the double loss for Rugg dropped him to a final record of 3-25. But we have seen some good stuff from Rugg this year, and especially this week with Jordan Addison going bonkers with 8 for 133 and 3 touchdowns. Told you that Sam Darnold threw for 5 touchdowns. Well, in this game, we had Justin Jefferson versus Jordan Addison. Jefferson went 7 for 132 and 2 touchdowns, and Addison went 8 for 133 and 3 touchdowns. So Jefferson put up 35.45, and Addison put up 42.8 in just a ridiculously narrow passing tree for Sam Darnold. Seemed to be effective, though. Why waste targets on the ancillary pieces when you can just throw to 2 elite receivers on every play? Seemed to be working against the Falcons. We've seen a lot of good stuff from his young guys. Better days ahead. He was missing some of his key players. Jaden Daniels, Drake May were on bye this week. But he does look good going forward. Brian Thomas has had a great season amidst the turmoil that has been the Jaguars. He had another solid game, 8 for 86. Jalen McMillan finally taking advantage of the increase in opportunities with Godwin on IR. He caught a pair of touchdowns. Christian Watson went over 100 yards. He's got a lot of good young talent on here. He's just missing a few pieces. Needs a little bit more depth, and he needs to probably add some running backs because his running backs generally combine for about 0 points a week right now. So the good news is, looks like a very deep running back draft this year, so it's possible he could plug a few holes and be in a far more competitive team next year than he has been this year record-wise. The next highest scoring team was my absent co-host. Jarsol beat Flinch 200.62 to 138.3, bringing his record to 4-24 and dropping Flinch to 19-9. And I think this was a matchup where both teams were disappointed with the result because the tough week from Flinch dropped him out of the conversation for a playoff bye, actually dropped him all the way down to the number 5 seed. And for Jarsol, the 200-point week dropped him out of position for the number 2 overall pick, as he managed to handily outscore Benign Rugg on the week and now on the season. So those two flipped spots, and Benign Rugg will be picking 102, and Jarsol will be picking 103 as a result of this matchup. And once again, we had another massive individual performance with Puka Nacua scoring 48.55 points on the strength of 12 catches, 162 yards and a touchdown, and a rushing touchdown. This was definitely a week of spike weeks, and that Puka Nacua performance was enough to give Jarsol the win. Did not get over the median, but he did get the head-to-head matchup win, and of course damaged his own draft pick value by dropping him a spot in the upcoming rookie draft. The next matchup featured Criddle taking down Mr. Good News with a score of 194.77 to a 19.85 from Mr. Good News. So this win brought Criddle to an even record of 14-14. Unfortunately, falling short of the playoff race, ended up finishing in 8th place as he did not get the win against the median. And Mr. Good News finishes off his perfect season at 0-28 with a final weekly score that may never be broken. It is thoroughly impressive that he managed to only score 19.85 points in a best ball league where we roster about 40 players and start 12 every week. It's almost impossible to be able to reach these levels of futility. Now, clearly this was by design. He's traded away anyone and everyone that manages to score points on his roster. His roster was in need of a full teardown, and he certainly committed to it to a level that we have not seen before and may never see again. So unfortunately for Criddle, he finished just short of the playoffs. He made a good run down the stretch, but just kind of ran out of gas. I think the Christian McCaffrey injury kind of haunted him all year. He just didn't have the horses to get it done. So we've seen he's already started kind of selling off pieces. It's possible we may need to see a little reset from Criddle here to try to get his roster in better shape going forward. And that brings us to our final matchup of the week, where Judd managed to defeat JMC 161.29 to 134.82. So Judd managed the win in the head-to-head matchup, but did not even get close to the median. So he'll finish the regular season with a record of 19-9. Good enough for the number 4 seed, but finishing short of the first round playoff bye. And JMC wraps up his regular season with a record of 9-19, though he did manage to hang into this playoff race far longer than anyone suspected. He ultimately finished short and will finish in 9th place. Although the fact that he was able to maintain a relative level of competitiveness while having essentially zeros every week at running back and tight end outside of Jonnu Smith, it's got to make him feel better that he's potentially a lot closer to being competitive than some of these other teams that he finished around in the standings. And that wraps up the 2024 regular season for the League About Nothing. So again, we'll show the standings here. Big Biscuits finishes first overall with a record of 25-3 and the most points scored by about 300. Wasn't even close. Mel finishes number 2 with a record of 22-6. Flea finishes third with a record of 21-7. Judd fourth with a record of 19-9. Flinch fifth, also with a record of 19-9. And then my team finished sixth with the final playoff spot with a record of 17-11. And for the non-playoff teams, Georgia Mike finishes seventh with a record of 15-13. Shocking turnaround from where he was last year in Mr. Good News' spot as the worst team in the league. The fact that he was able to turn this team around to actually be in the playoff race all the way through the last week of the season is fairly impressive, considering where he was last year at this time. Girdle finishes 8th with a record of 14-14. JMC 9th with a record of 9-19. Jarsal 10th with a record of 4-24. Benign Rug 11th with a record of 3-25. And Mr. Good News finishes 12th with a record of 0-28. And also the least points scored by about 2,000. No one tanks like Mr. Good News tanks. Maybe no one ever in history. And now on to the playoffs. So we've got 2 playoff matchups to discuss this week in our wild card round. The number 3 versus number 6 seed, which is Flea versus my team. And the number 4 versus number 5 seed, which is Judd's team against Flinch's team. Flinch being the newcomer to the playoffs this year, as the other 5 teams were all playoff teams last year. Not a lot of turnover from last year to this year as far as making the playoffs. Seeding looks a little different. But if you go back since the inception, the only teams that have made the playoffs every year are Mel's team and Judd's team. And the only teams to make the playoffs the last 3 years are Mel's team, Judd's team, and my team. And we still have not had a repeat champion. And there's a good chance we won't have that again this year because the only team that has won before that is still alive in the playoffs is my team. And I'm currently a giant underdog this week to to Flea's team. So we'll see what happens. It's possible that as early as next week, this group will be whittled down to teams that have not won the championship yet in this league. And I think that about wraps it up because I'm not going to talk about the consolation bracket since there's no reason to. There's no reason to even really have one because it doesn't mean anything. Nobody wins anything for winning it. It doesn't affect your draft position because that's locked in after the end of the regular season. So I'm not sure why these teams are even playing, but we're not going to talk about it because it doesn't matter. So until next time, I'll see you in the league chat.